Hey there, it's Tom Jordan. Got a great program today. It's an important program. We're going to talk about the 2024 election. What do you know about that? It's just a week away from today. Well, it's the final date to vote, theoretically, in 1 week from today. And the election isn't just about, winning states. We talk a lot about that, about, which state is going which direction. But it's really about capturing some of these key swing counties inside those swing states. Every vote in these little crucial pockets of these counties and these states could tip the balance between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, with Kamala Harris needing just 44 more electoral votes based on what we know so far, and then Donald Trump needing about 51. In these battleground counties in places like Arizona and in Georgia, in Michigan, in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, these are all going to play kingmaker, if you will, on election night. And in places like Maricopa County, Erie County, Saginaw County, they're not just names on a map. They actually matter. They hold the power to determine whether the next 4 years will be built on the past or will be taking a sharp turn to the future, so to speak. All right, so a political consultant and a messaging strategist, John Selleck from Harbor Strategic Public Affairs, is going to join me in just a moment here to break all of this down, just a few seconds away. And we're also going to get into today's big headlines after that conversation and something that happened today. Well, we're going to talk about it today, but a Hillsdale College vice president and a legal counsel for Hillsdale College. We'll talk about what he got in the mail. Yeah, it was a ballot with somebody's name on it, someone who they don't believe ever lived in his house, all the way from Washington, D.C. So we'll get into that as well. Spoke to him this morning. Also, a reminder, you are invited to a special election night watch party at Tom Jordan Live headquarters. We will be broadcasting for 4 hours straight on November 5th from 8 p.m. to midnight, watching the returns as they come in from around the country as the polls close in these various states and time zones as well. And we'll start, of course, in the East Coast, which we're located in the Eastern time zone here. So you can be here as well with me in downtown Brighton, Michigan. If you're in the Metro Detroit area, Brighton, Michigan, it's Speakeasy Studios is where we're located, right at the corner of Main Street and Grand River Boulevard. More information will be posted at tomjordanlive.com. You can even email directly if you want me at tom@wayneradio.com. We'll have drinks and food will be provided. We're partnering up with our next door neighbor here, Label. It's a restaurant next door, Label, and we'll be kind of going back and forth, cross-pollinating, I guess, if you put it that way, with each other. So that's coming up on election night. Would love for you to come. Again, food and drinks provided. Election night, 8 p.m. to midnight Eastern time. A live special edition of Tom Jordan Live. Also, just a reminder to chime in that you can comment today, this morning. Ask some questions in the comments section. I'll get to those in a moment. Also, you can ask questions of John Selleck, our political consultant this morning, and we'll pause our interview, and then we'll take your questions if you have some for him regarding the elections and the complications of it and the strategies that go involved. Also, the best way you can help Tom Jordan Live is simply to subscribe, watch the content, and then just click that notification bell as we provide new content throughout the day. All right, here we go. The path to the White House doesn't run through Washington, D.C. Did you know that? Yeah, it cuts straight through Maricopa and Erie and Saginaw and Grand Traverse counties, just like those, these swing counties in these battleground states. And this is where the fight is going on between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. You get those, you get the Oval. And this election is going to be decided in these rural counties and these suburban schools and the courthouses and the main streets of rural America and suburban America. Maricopa County is the largest and most influential county in the state of Arizona. I'm sure you've heard of it. It's well known nowadays. And they hold the key to the state's 11 electoral votes there in Maricopa County. It's where Phoenix, Arizona is. Santa Cruz County, California, reflects the national Hispanic voting trends pretty much with precision. You can look at Santa Cruz County. You can understand where the Hispanic vote is going. Then you got Fayette County in Georgia. Once a solidly red county, it's becoming a battleground in its own right as the makeup changes there and people are kind of going back and forth, swinging a little bit from here to there. Saginaw County in the state of Michigan has voted with the winner in 4 consecutive elections. Keep your eye on Saginaw County. And then there's Michigan's Grand Traverse County. That part of the state of Michigan is leaned Republican, but it backed Whitmer in 2022. And don't tell anybody, but Mayor Pete Buttigieg lives in that county as well now. He's the transportation secretary. Don't tell anybody that. We're not doxing him here. We're just letting you know who lives in which counties. And don't even get me started on Lackawanna County. You don't want to go there with me, but you will with John Selleck. He knows all about this, and particularly in the state of Michigan as he studies this. John Selleck, of course, is the CEO of Harbor Strategic Public Affairs, and he will get to John Selleck in just a moment. But we're going to ask him about, Maricopa County. That's a big deal. Maricopa County swung from Donald Trump in 2016 to Joe Biden in 2020, and it really highlights the volatility in the national elections when it comes to Maricopa County. Now, remember, that county, and when it was called early by some of these networks in 2020, they said they gave it to Joe Biden back then. They were calling it for him. And a lot of people were upset about that. And there was a lot of, they think a lot of what was happening in Maricopa County in 2020 were similar to things that were happening in the state of Michigan and in the state of Georgia. And I do hope to get to this later in the program, but there was a situation. Remember all the accusations of voter fraud in Georgia and what was happening there at the center where they're counting the votes, and how there was a pipe that burst and everyone had to leave the building and all the Republicans were told to go home. And then afterwards, the accusation was that, well, the Democrats went back in. Well, there is this guy that came out. It was released yesterday. The Gateway Pundit had this. Patty McMurray wrote about it. It was on Fox News. Now, of course, not all the major networks are covering it because they don't want this to come out, but there was a Democratic activist, very well known in the state of Georgia, very much involved in the elections in the state of Georgia. And in fact, I think he's the spokesman for the AFL-C. I think the union there. He came out. He was caught on tape, and this dinner he was having with somebody who was recording the dinner, and he went through how the Democrats in Georgia did exactly what they were accused of doing by these what were called extremist Republicans, and all this conspiracy theory about voter fraud in the state of Georgia. Well, he came out and step by step outlined how they did it. And remember, he's a strong leftist, Democratic activist, very much involved in this. And the state of Georgia, he said, yeah, when that happened, remember the pipe burst, we used that as an excuse to kick out the Republicans. We went back in, and then he describes stuffing ballots. Watch the video, because I don't want you to think that it's just me talking about this and I'm making this stuff up. It's from his mouth. And plus, I don't want to knock on the door from the Attorney General's office from the state of Michigan saying you're spreading disinformation, and that's now a crime. You can't challenge the election and the integrity of the elections here. So, right. So, actually, speaking of this whole situation, I do want to get to this first. We're going to get to John Selleck in a moment, because we'll talk about strategy, what you're seeing here, the different states and the counties that are at play around the country. But there's another situation going on. And since we're speaking about election integrity and the fact that it's okay in this country to question the election, in fact, you have every right to do so. In fact, you should be applauded for doing it. That's your right as a citizen. Only in countries where they don't want transparency do they make it a big deal, saying you can't talk about that because you're putting these thoughts in people's mind that might make them question the legitimacy of an election. Well, it's your right to do so. But I want to bring this up because I got word of this late yesterday of an individual who is with Hillsdale College. His name is Robert Norton. He is the vice president of Hillsdale College, and he is legal counsel there. And he got in his mailbox a ballot from Washington, D.C. with someone else's name on it, someone he doesn't believe ever lived in his house. I spoke with him just a few minutes ago here on Tom Jordan Live. Here's that interview. Robert Norton is Hillsdale College's vice president and legal counsel, and Robert joins me now. So nice to have you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you for having me.
It's a very interesting story. So you opened your Michigan mailbox, the way I understand this, and you discover a Washington, D.C. absentee ballot in your mailbox addressed to somebody else, to a stranger who apparently, there it is right there, never
Mhm.
lived in that home. At least there's no record of it.
Right.
What was your, so explain what happened. What was your reaction? And what do you think had, or I guess I should say, why do you think this had occurred?
I don't know exactly why it occurred, but I know that when I received it, the printed material was kind of so slick. I guess I've never received a mail-in ballot from Washington D.C., but I thought it was some kind of promotion or advertisement. I was opening the mail and then opened it up and said, "Man, this looks like it's an official ballot here." And then looking into it further, then thought maybe it's a hoax of some kind. But no, it's indeed a real ballot. There's a person who's registered to vote at that address, but has only been there since June, July timeframe. And in trying to get in touch with the person to see if they want their ballot, the phone number doesn't work. There's no email that we can find. There's no social media contact. And it's either a 96-year-old lady who lives in Virginia or probably the 25-year-old person. But a 25-year-old person without social media, without a cell phone number that works, without email, who's only lived somewhere for 3, 4, 5 months seems a little unusual.
Yeah, and suspicious. I mean, we don't know for sure. We don't know if this person for sure exists or not, or it could be, as you say, one of two people, an elderly woman in Virginia or a young, 25-year-old who may have lived at that property. I mean, what are the, what are the implications? What does this potentially imply that maybe this, in terms of the level of potential fraud that this might exemplify?
Yeah, I think that's the point. I mean, mail out ballots. We're told not to worry. It's a totally secure system, that it has plenty of voter integrity. But here, at least in one instance, we have a ballot that was mailed out and ends up in a small town in Michigan. I mean, I live in Jonesville. And there's really no explanation. I've never lived in Washington D.C. The home I live in is an historic home that we redid, and we know about 40 years worth of the inhabitants who've been in that home and nobody with that name. So it's awfully odd that this ballot would end up in the mail in a small town in Michigan.
Well, what is the purpose? I mean, the logic behind a ballot coming from Washington, D.C. to a house in Michigan, in rural Michigan, down close to the college in which you work at Hillsdale College. Why would that occur in the first place?
I mean, the only thing you can imagine is an absentee ballot, right? Somebody requesting an absentee ballot who says, "I'm not going to be here, and I need to have the ballot sent to me." Of course, we would think of our military and other people who have a legitimate need to have an absentee ballot. But there's more of this mail out ballot phenomenon occurring, right? Even in Michigan, we have what's called the motor voter law, where people can easily opt into a system where they'll be mailed out ballots. And then you're going to have ballots such as this. They're going to be mailed out, and theoretically, shenanigans can occur. People can do something with them that's other than having the voter integrity I think you and I would hope and expect.
Well, it's not a new thing. I mean, we've heard the warnings about mail-in balloting and how it correlates with an increased level, at least potential fraud. I mean, even Jimmy Carter was warning about this. This used to be something that was acknowledged by all political parties in this country, but now it seems there is at least this perceived belief that no, it doesn't increase the risk of fraud. And we can look at these various circumstances. Yours is just one example of this, but I know this occurs on a regular basis. People are receiving ballots without their name on it, and that would allow somebody with nefarious motives to fill it out and to forge it and then to submit it without very little risk of being caught. So why is it that nowadays, especially in the last 4 years, that somehow mail-in balloting is considered totally secure? In fact, even more secure than what the elections were like in 2016.
Yeah, I think that's a misnomer. I mean, the notion that it's more secure, I think we certainly can say that just it defies logic. You bring up Jimmy Carter, and we'll recall that when Jimmy Carter would go monitor elections in other countries, you would dip your thumb in the purple ink, and then it's pretty difficult to get that permanent purple ink off your thumb in time in order to go vote again. But a simple system like that, same day voting, where there's some indicia that you voted, we then started saying, well, maybe you don't really need ID to vote. maybe, we can have you have mail-in ballots. Maybe you can drop them off in a dumpster-like device. Somebody can drop them off for you. Maybe other people can collect up these ballots and drop them off for you. Then they're going to go somewhere and be sorted and dealt with by people that we really don't want to tell you who they are, what they did with them. In Michigan, the last election where we had the voter integrity issues, there were these data warehouses apparently, but we don't really know where they are. We don't know who worked there. We don't know who monitored what occurred there. So I think, we all can believe that the voter integrity is not where I would say it should be. I believe in
No.
fair elections. Hillsdale College is a proud proponent of the United States Constitution, our founding documents, liberty, freedom. And I think everyone should vote, should have the right to vote. And then we should know that your vote has been counted and the system has integrity.
Right. But the operative word there is fair. And fair means that, yes, people who are citizens and are eligible to vote should be allowed to vote, but those who are not should not be allowed to vote. And I don't know if there was a video that came out that was released yesterday that shows this Democratic activist in the state of Georgia outlined how he was involved in cheating in the 2020 election, and a lot of the accusations that were categorized as conspiracy theory, and were now he was admitting all that did occur, at least a lot of it did. So there's people out there admitting it behind closed doors and being caught on video. And I don't know if what he said was true or not, but at least it's raising enough suspicion to be further investigated. And you're an attorney, so you look at the legalities of what's happening right now, and there's a lot of laws that are being passed. And we could just look at Washington, D.C., where the location where you received this ballot, and they've made a decision there to make automatic mail-in voting permanent. Like they automatically, my understanding is, and you can correct me if I'm wrong here, they will automatically mail you a ballot in the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C. Is that how it works? And is that, from a legal standpoint, something you think is safe?
I don't know. I have not researched DC law specifically, but I believe that may be the case. I know there are many states, including Michigan, that are certainly trying to be liberal in the amount of ballots that will be sent out. The motor voter laws that several states have passed. When you register a vehicle, you're going to be automatically opting into a system. And as I understand it, many of those will be these mail out ballots are going to follow you. I think there's a problem on many levels. First of all, just the tendency for some other person to fill out the ballot, or even have you fill out the ballot while they're lording over you. As we've heard in some situations, someone bangs on your door and in an angry tone tells you, I need that ballot and I want it filled out now.
Hmm.
Well, if you didn't have that ballot there, the tendency to go harvest those ballots in a manner like that wouldn't be possible. So it opens up the door for lots of mischief, and it really is a shame. I mean, we all want to be proud of Election Day. I have election memorabilia around my office since I've been a kid, 18 years old. I've been involved in politics and elections. I have campaign buttons, and I even have a little sign that used to say closed for Election Day that a business would have put on that we're letting all of our employees go vote. It's a proud part of our heritage. It's a shame to see people trying to destroy it. And that people can't go to bed believing that the votes of the American people have been properly and accurately counted.
Were you able to, or at least did you attempt or maybe contact somebody in D.C. When you got this ballot and say, hey, listen, I think this was a mistake, or did you raise any concerns for the folks back there on the East Coast?
Yeah, actually, the Federalist did a little piece on this, and they reached out to them. And as I understand it, last I heard, nobody's responded. They've left messages. They've tried to get a response because the response is going to be interesting. I mean, somebody either is deprived of a ballot they really did want and filled out an absentee form, or there was never an absentee ballot form filled out, or it's the automatic ballots being sent out. And if I got one in a little small town in Michigan, how many other people? Was there a problem with the database? I mean, any answer is going to be interesting. And so far, as far as I know, there's been no answer given.
Yeah, well, you're not the first person I talked to that this has happened to, by the way. There were many people coming out saying, I got multiple ballots in my house for nobody that lives in my house. And, what do we do with these ballots that are here, that are sitting here? I mean, it seems ripe for fraud. What do you think of the long-term implications? If these kinds of things are allowed to occur with, from what I see, very little pushback from the powers that be, or a willingness to investigate this, except maybe a one-off here, a one-off there, and then they kind of wipe their hands clean and say, well, we did our investigations. But there seems to be a lot of these cases occurring. If we keep finding these misaddressed ballots in Michigan or in other states, what are the long-term implications for, they always say protecting democracy, but for democracy or for this republic in which we live?
Yeah, I mean, the ramifications are, I mean, at a first level, I would imagine people just say, well, I'm not going to vote because the system's rigged. Why should I even go to the trouble? And that's a tragedy right there, right? That people would say, I can't really participate in the system because it's been rigged. There's somebody else in charge. And then, of course, ultimately, we can all speculate, but you get to the point where you believe the people in power are going to be there one way or another, whether there's an election set up, theoretical election, as we see in some other countries. That would be awful. That would be bringing about the end of America as we know it.
Well, to that point, we are being told, and Hillsdale College is in the state of Michigan, and the Secretary of State in Michigan is a woman named Jocelyn Benson, and she has joined forces with the Attorney General of Michigan, Dana Nessel, and the Governor of Michigan, Governor Gretchen Whitmer, and the media to basically say people who raise these kinds of concerns are actually the ones putting these bad thoughts in our minds to make us think that the elections are not secure. And that itself is a threat to democracy and a threat to election integrity and getting people out to vote. And I say, well, actually, if these things are really happening and they're being ignored, that's the real threat. What do you make of? I don't know how much you've been paying attention to the Michigan Secretary of State's and her kind of latest. I call them games. I think they're political games, but her characterizing, bringing up these types of issues, is shouldn't be done unless it comes through her office. What do you make of that?
I'm very well aware of it. Have been contacted even by investigators working with the Attorney General's office in an attempt to find out what I might have been saying or doing, questioning elections and election integrity. So I'm very well aware of it. And I think that is perhaps the scariest thing of all. In our country, part of what our founding documents created in the Constitution we have, you have a right to challenge and speak out against the government and elected officials. That is a proud American heritage. Now, you go to other countries, you don't have that right. In fact, if you do much traveling abroad, I lived expat for a while. Part of the training you receive is, hey, you're not in the United States. You start saying something bad about the government officials here, they're going to come and arrest you. So in the United States, often I would tell them, boy, in our country, you could say you don't agree with the president or the governor, or that you have serious questions about what's going on. And it's a proud tradition. You won't get arrested. You won't be hassled. You won't be subjected to lawfare. And that term lawfare, as you well know, just have malicious type legal actions brought against you and force you to have to go to the expense and difficulty of defending yourself to ultimately even be found, okay, you're innocent. And the more these tactics are even threatened, I think that in and of itself should not be tolerated in our country, in our state. And I hope that tactics like that will be rolled back and will stop trying to intimidate people from speaking out about a system that they're questioning whether the integrity has been maintained.
Do you feel that when you were approached by these various officials here in the state of Washington, that did you take that as an act of intimidation?
So I was approached by Michigan people looking into the Michigan issue. And yes, I definitely think it's meant to be intimidation. I think the comments being made about, the people that are spreading this are bad people, and that there's been an attempt to criminalize people who've tried to correct or be involved with the voter integrity and the way votes are being maintained, the ballots, how they're maintained, how they're counted. Did the system really work properly? When you start criminalizing people or threatening them with vexatious litigation, I think that should be an outrage to all of us, whatever party. If I saw this occurring, Republican, Independent, Democratic, I mean, you just can't stand for that. That is the tactics of a banana republic. That is the tactics of people such as a Putin, right? If you run against me, I'm going to put you in jail, and all your
Hmm.
friends better run for their lives. But that shouldn't be the United States. We should welcome anyone who calls into question certainly the integrity of the election system. As we say in so many other circles, from Christianity to even Hillsdale College, the truth has nothing to fear. So, if you want to look into something, make sure it has integrity. If the system has integrity, you're not afraid of that. You say, go ahead, take a look. I
Hmm.
want you to have all of your concerns resolved. But if
Hmm.
someone says, hey, the very fact you want to look means you're a bad person and we are now going to come after you, that to me says the opposite. There must be something here someone's trying to hide.
Yeah, and they're doing it in league with the media. I got a copy of a letter from Jocelyn Benson, the Michigan Secretary of State, asking people who see people like you or me raising questions about the integrity of the election. They classify that as disinformation. You are to note that individual and the claim that that individual made, take a picture if possible, and send it in to the Michigan Secretary of State office, and they will take it from there. And you
I
can
think I
just go
better
on your
turn you in.
way.
I'm gonna turn you in right now.
Yeah, go ahead, and I'll hire you as my lawyer if that's okay. I got the backing of Hillsdale College, as an esteemed institution.
Well,
Robert Norton is Hillsdale's vice president and legal counsel. Robert, I wish you all the best, and I'm very grateful you're sharing this. Be strong. The truth, as you said, has nothing to hide, and I applaud you for coming on the program and others as well to talk about what happened in your situation, because I suspect, and I do know, it's happening elsewhere as well. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
thank you for having me on. Thank you for bringing the issue out to the public.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir, indeed. Yeah, Robert Norton, great individual, and he's brave nowadays. You wouldn't think it would take courage to talk about what he found in his own mailbox, which shouldn't have been there. It should be illegal what's going on, but it's now being supported by the powers that be in this country. And if you don't support it somehow, I mean, the fact that he was contacted by these officials saying what you're raising about the election is dangerous. And they don't do that in this country. They're not supposed to. They do that in these other authoritarian regimes where they do believe in, communism. They do believe in fascism. Those are the fascists. And people who are now questioning these things that are objectively occurring are now being called fascists. It is the opposite, and it's a ruse, and that is what is dangerous right now. And you got to ask yourself, why is this occurring? We are taking your comments. We're going to get to a couple of them right now. Then I'm going to go through some headlines here, and then we'll go back to your comments again. So you have time to chime in. I always appreciate the questions, comments in the comment section of YouTube or X or Facebook. And then, of course, later on, this is all going to live on Apple Podcasts and Spotify as well. Let's begin with the first comment here. Cameron is going to bring that up. Dustin Harris. Hey, buddy. How are you, Dustin? We hope, too, that the integrity of the election is scrutinized as it should, and all the people involved in the process designed by the Constitution and historical precedent to provide oversight. This is so, Dustin, it's such a crucial point you're making, that the integrity of the election is dependent upon people making sure that everything is going as legally required. And now there are these efforts to make it more difficult to do that. I mean, you look at your state, Michigan, how these election challengers, poll watchers, are now being pushed aside. And there's space now between the poll watcher, the election challenger, and the poll worker, who is now be given essentially the authority to say, this person, I don't like that poll watcher's questions to me, so kick him out. And the sheriff's department, whoever, has to come in and escort them out of the building. That's what's happening right now in these various precincts and these various locations where these ballots are being counted. It's not supposed to be the case. And on top of that, Dustin, and you know this, that the number of poll watchers, the discrepancy between the Democrats and Republicans, I forget the number now, but there are like hundreds of Democrat poll watchers and just a handful, crumbs of Republicans in the process. It is completely weighed in favor of the Democrats in this election. Great comment, Dustin. Always appreciate your insight. Let's take another comment here. Let's go to, as I'm looking at the screen, seeing it for the first time with all of you, Taz. In today's high-tech surveillance, Michigan's Governor Whitmer failing to clean up the voter roll is inexcusable. One cannot help is being done intentionally for nefarious reasons. Yeah, well, I would say Whitmer is probably in league, but Jocelyn Benson's the one that's also, she's directly in charge of failing to clean up the voter rolls. It is inexcusable. She can do it now, but there's one problem, because other, pretty credible secretaries of state in other states that are doing this, like in Virginia and in Alabama, and I think Texas was one of them. They're actually cleaning their voter rolls and taking non-citizens off of those voter rolls prior to the election. The Department of Justice under Kamala Harris and Joe Biden, Merrick Garland, they're now suing those states to put those individuals back on the voter rolls, the ones that are not eligible to vote, including non-citizens. Put them back. You're not allowed to touch that until after the election. Because what? After the election, it becomes too late. There is no excuse, Taz. You're correct. And there should be an edict from Governor Whitmer going, listen, Jocelyn Benson, follow state law. Take him out. Don't wait till 2027 like you want to do. Taz, thanks so much. All right, more of your comments are coming up and questions as well. Tom Jordan Live on YouTube, X, Facebook. And of course, we'll be on Spotify and Apple Podcasts later in the day as well. All right, just 7 days as well. Can you believe it? It's a week away until Election Day. We're going to look now at Wisconsin real quick. It couldn't be tighter there. A USA Today Suffolk University poll shows former President Donald Trump and Vice President Kamala Harris locked in a dead heat in Wisconsin, with Trump at 48% and Kamala Harris at 47%, well within that margin of error, but Trump ahead by 1 point in Wisconsin. And this poll highlights seriously a big concern for the Democratic Party. They are concerned about this. They're asking questions like, what is going on with the electorate? Why are we so suddenly far behind in this case? So that's Wisconsin there, a major battleground state. And if you recall, the capital of Wisconsin is Madison, Wisconsin. It is an incredibly liberal city within the state. And that's, of course, what the state is. The politics typically run pretty blue in the state of Wisconsin as of the past few years. But now it's tightening up. And I think what we're seeing here is this acknowledgement by a number of Democrats who are saying, we don't like the party going this far. I know Madison does. Madison, Wisconsin is cool with a lot of these things that are taking place. They love Kamala Harris there. But I don't think the most other municipalities in the suburban areas. Milwaukee might be a different story. They're going to be a little leaning liberal there as well. But when you consider these rural counties and what's happening with the independent voter, it's obviously a case. So right now, 48 to 47% in Wisconsin. And this is that key battleground, of course. Trump won it in 2016. Remember that. But Biden narrowly flipped it in 2020 by just over 20,000 votes. So again, Wisconsin is one of these battleground states. Interestingly, you look at the counties there, and we're going to get into this. I'm going to save this conversation with John Selleck, the CEO of Harbor Strategic Public Affairs, for tomorrow, because we're going to go through these counties and highlight the real battle is in these various more smaller regions within the battleground states, and how important it is that these counties, the members, the citizens there go out and vote. But in Wisconsin, Door County, this is a kind of a region known for picking the eventual winner. They've done it consistently. And right now, Door County currently shows Kamala Harris with a slight edge in Wisconsin, leading Trump by 3 points. And you look at like gender dynamics, they're also playing a major role in Wisconsin's numbers. Harris enjoys strong support from women in the state of Wisconsin. Trump commanding a significant lead among men, of course, particularly those in the working class, the men who are out there working for a living. Over 850,000 early ballots have already been cast in the state, and both candidates are scrambling to mobilize the voters there, down to the wire in this very pivotal blue wall state. The critical importance of white working class voters, too, in Wisconsin. The high percentage of non-college educated white voters in Wisconsin, it's an opportunity for Donald Trump to regain ground through promises of economic growth and these trade policies that prioritize American industries so jobs don't go overseas with these globalist policies that hurt American jobs. So Donald Trump's messaging, it's got to cut through all of this noise and speak directly to these voters' frustrations with the status quo, with the Biden-era policies that many believe have neglected middle America, flyover country. Kamala Harris, her reliance on identity politics, she's got this lead among women. It highlights how her campaign leads heavily on identity politics, as if she is going to make women's lives better. How so? If the job market goes away, if private industry goes away, which it is under her policies, her socialistic policies, it doesn't benefit women or men. But she's a woman, so it seems that that's what's being highlighted in her race. Donald Trump can counter this by emphasizing some tangible, family-focused policies like school choice, economic relief, issues that resonate beyond the superficial identity divides, especially with suburban mothers who want their children to be educated at a better level as they are right now. These are the swing state stakes, if you will, and the broader implications of this. Winning Wisconsin isn't just about, securing 10 electoral votes. It's a bellwether for the broader Rust Belt region. And a victory in Wisconsin really could signal a kind of a red shift across neighboring battleground states like Michigan and Pennsylvania. And it's kind of a domino effect that reshapes the entire election map in Donald Trump's favor in those Rust Belt states, the Midwest, northern Midwest. All right, let's go to RFK Jr. He's got a fight to remove his name from these key swing state ballots, and he's not being allowed to in some of them. So Robert F. Kennedy Jr. making this last-ditch effort to remove his name from Michigan and Wisconsin, and claiming election interference right now is at play. He dropped out of the race after the presidential, the primary and whatnot. Obviously, he got in after the primary as a candidate, but he endorsed Donald Trump. So he wants out of the race. He has every right to get out of the race. And Kennedy, he's arguing that, listen, his name is being kept on the ballots in some of these battleground states on purpose by those, respective secretaries of state. And what could happen is it can confuse voters. Oh, wait, I thought RFK dropped out, but here he is, so I'm going to vote for him instead. And it can siphon these critical votes away from Donald Trump in those razor-thin battleground states. And despite RFK Jr.'s request, Michigan's Secretary of State Jocelyn Benson and the Wisconsin Elections Commission have blocked his removal. They're citing, election laws don't allow us to do that. Yes, they do. It's completely up to you, Jocelyn Benson, to either take him off or leave him on the ballot. And they're saying, well, these logistical challenges like, absentee voting, we've already printed the ballots. Well, you printed the ballots after he requested to be taken off. So it's now heading to the U.S. Supreme Court. And Justice Amy Coney Barrett, she's requested an expedited review of this. And RFK Jr. is asserting here that his First Amendment rights are being violated, as forcing him to remain on the ballot distorts his endorsement of Donald Trump, his former competitor, but now he's all in with Donald Trump here, and yet he's still on the ballot. So both of these states are arguing that, changing ballots this close to Election Day would cause disruptions. But Kennedy's team is like, no, the real disruption is that you're pretending that I'm still in this race, and I am not in it. You want me in it because it'll siphon votes from Donald Trump, and it'll protect Kamala Harris. That is his argument. We'll see if the Supreme Court hears to say, but it could set a major precedent in these future elections if he wins in this, if the court rules in Kennedy's favor. These are weaponization of election laws in those states. Keeping RFK Jr.'s name on the ballot, despite his withdrawal, isn't about logistical concerns. It's about a political move to split the vote and benefit Kamala Harris. These election rules are manipulated to serve these partisan interests. We know this because she tried to keep him off the ballot before, right? She's also tried to keep Cornel West off the ballot in Michigan. I'm talking about Jocelyn Benson. And so keep him off because he hurts Kamala Harris, but keep RFK Jr. on because he helps Kamala Harris if he's on the ballot. That is the objective analysis of what's going on here, because the law does not say at all that, in fact, the courts have ruled on this, that Jocelyn Benson it's up to her what she wants to do. So free speech, it's right there in the crosshairs. Forcing Kennedy to stay on the ballot turns his political endorsement into compelled speech. If you want to make that legal argument, that's exactly what it is. It's undermining the principle of individual liberty that's at the heart of fair elections. It's total hypocrisy. Democrats blocking RFK Jr.'s withdrawal while fighting to remove Green Party candidates in other states exposes their selective commitment to election integrity. It's a double standard. And they're always playing these double standards when political advantage is on the line. All right, I want to bring up this issue of ESG because we have a great guy who chimed in, Zach Smale, Zach Smail, Smail. He contributed the other day to Tom Jordan Live. He asked a comment. He put up a comment and asked a question last week. Great question regarding once known as the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive in the European Union. And I promised I would follow up with Zach, and it has to do with ESG, environment, social, and governance. These standards that have been proliferating in the United States, but also the world, really. So as background, here's what's happening. Essentially, corporations are being squeezed once again. And in the European Union, their latest move is called the Corporate Sustainability Due Diligence Directive. It forces businesses, both in Europe and abroad, that includes in the United States, to comb through every corner of their supply chains, making sure they are compliant with environmental, social, and governance requirements, ESG. And on paper, this all sounds noble. It's a noble cause, as do many of these, authoritarian, dictatorial mandates. But the reality? Well, it's authoritarian and dictatorial. It's a ruse in order to effectively implement government control over the private sector. It's kind of communistic, if you want to break it down. Not to mention, it's very costly, and it's a bureaucratic nightmare for businesses. Imagine businesses being forced to navigate this maze of red tape just to stay compliant or risk fines on suddenly these new mandates that have come in recent years. And many of these smaller suppliers, they're already bracing for the fallout. As these large companies will inevitably be cutting their partnerships to save money. They're too costly now to monitor all of this. And here's the kicker. The burden of all these sustainability rules and mandates are placed on the companies that will get passed right along to consumers in the form of higher prices. So this directive, in effect, extends the European Union's regulatory arm around the world, demanding companies operating in Europe, even the foreign companies that operate there, to abide by their rigid ESG framework. It's totally opposed to, free market innovation. All right, all that said, let's break down again what is ESG as we look at Larry Fink there, from former 60s hippie, as it looks like. Here's a bit of a refresher on ESG. All right, so ESG policies, what they do is they coerce companies into politicized agendas. So ESG policies are forcing companies to adopt politically charged initiatives like climate activism or progressive social policies instead of focusing on improving their products or their services. And it undermines the principles of free enterprise by coercing businesses to serve ideological agendas rather than their consumer needs. It doesn't benefit the customer nor the business. It benefits these ideologies from these far leftists who are now in these various running these various governments around the world. And it replaces economic efficiencies with political conformity. So you're essentially turning businesses into tools for social engineering rather than, if you want to call it engines of innovation. It is woke capitalism. ESG is. So it demands that companies comply with things like critical race theory, which if you don't know what that is, you need to watch the program from yesterday because I broke down exactly what the goal of critical race theory is based on the word of critical race theorists who are using all of this as a ruse. It's not about stopping racism. It's not about sharing your story or your ideology. It's about undermining the United States of America, specifically overthrowing it. They use the word insurgency. It's an insurrection to start anew, to wipe off the face of the earth the United States as it currently exists, and then build back better. That's critical race theory. And if you don't believe me, just watch the show. You can hear it from yesterday. What was yesterday? The 28th, August 28th. Watch that program at Tom Jordan Live, and we break it down for you. Yeah, October 28th, yesterday's program. Anyway, so you got to subscribe to critical race theory. You got to subscribe to radical gender ideology. And you know what that is. You got to be pro-abortion in your policies with your company. Your company corporate policies have to align with pro-abortion ideologies. And what that does is that improves your social scores, and it makes investors clear. They clear the way for investors to invest in your company. So it creates a dangerous precedent where political activism replaces merit. Division is now fostered within these companies. It alienates employees and customers. Well, how does that happen? Well, if you're of a certain race or ideology, if you're a conservative, you will be alienated from the other employees. You will be labeled and pointed out and separated. This is exactly what it does. It's Marxism at work in private enterprise. It erodes trust in corporations by turning all of these workplaces into these, battlegrounds for very controversial cultural issues that people already disagree with, but now they're being compelled to agree with these things, or else it's conformity. Companies scoring well on the ESG metrics are then rewarded with favorable investment terms, regardless of their actual business performance or their product qualities. So it's not a return on investment in terms of financially or fiduciary responsibility. It's basically if you believe that man-made global warming is destroying this planet, as you see the flames burning on that cartoon right there, as if that's really happening. And if you don't believe that, then you're out. No investments for you. So it distorts completely the market competition, rewarding ideology over actual, innovation. It will stifle growth. It forces companies to focus more on the optics than the excellence of their company. Hey, you guys look good, so you pass here. And smaller businesses are going to be pushed out. The small businessman or woman gets pushed out of business, and because the cost of compliance and all this stuff with ESG standards, it's prohibitively high. You can't afford it. The smaller businesses will be at a necessary disadvantage here against these large corporations. They've got the resources to meet all these demands. It's gonna interfere with profits, but at least they can survive. Small businesses can, and it stifles market diversity by consolidating power in the hands of the large corporations, kills competition, and it hurts. It's monopolistic. It's exactly what they say they are opposed to is what they are actually supporting by ESG. Think about energy independence as well. This is all in line with this. And yes, it is true that the likes of Kamala Harris, Alyssa Slotkin, Jennifer Granholm, the Secretary of Energy in this country, they are completely opposed to fossil fuels. They have said as much. And now they're backing off just a little bit because it's an election year. But all of these ESG standards, they are opposed to fossil fuels as well. So they push companies to abandon fossil fuels in favor of the green energy initiatives. Green energy, ESG policies, they're damaging the United States energy sector, and they reduce energy independence. And it's exactly how they want it to be. It increases reliance on foreign energy sources. We will be more reliant on China. Despite Jennifer Granholm, yes, she was lying when she said switching to all green energy, renewable energies, is actually going to decouple us more quickly from China. No. She knows that's not true. It's just the opposite of that. And Gretchen Whitmer said the same thing, the governor of Michigan. It makes our states, it makes our country more vulnerable to these geopolitical threats that exist right now. It compromises national security, economic stability. It prioritizes environmental idealism over practical energy needs. You can look at any third world country and you can say, okay, does that third world country have energy independence? Do they have access to fossil fuels in abundance or not? And the answer is no, they don't have access to fossil fuels in abundance. And that is a major reason why many people in that country are living in poverty. So ESG policies, they're not just ideologically driven, but they're financially irresponsible. They're forcing investors to accept lower returns in exchange for virtue signaling. And it just gets rid of the whole purpose of investing in the first place. savings, pensions, those things they say they care about. It gets rid of all of that. That doesn't matter. That's just money. We care about the planet. Don't you care about the planet? So anyway, the corporations are not liking this. I don't think the average citizen should like this. It's a look at where BlackRock, a major investment firm in this country, Vanguard, you might have your 401k with Vanguard. They're using ESG metrics to enforce political agendas on the businesses across the board. So you're investing in, look, check your Vanguard account, check your BlackRock account, see what's going on there, because they're doing this maybe behind. You're not aware of this, but you should look into your account, see where you're investing, and if it's really providing the ROI that it should be. It's dangerous. It's monoculture, corporate monoculture, a handful of elites dictating business practices regardless of the return on investment, not to mention the polarization within the workplace. You've got to have these divisive political stances, demotivating employees who disagree with those positions. And so it's necessarily going to divide employees. Hey, I'm a conservative. Oh, you are? I see how that is. You sit over there, and we're going to forego your promotion, and we're going to give it to so-and-so over here who aligns with all of our political activism in this. So anyway, that's ESG. And unfortunately, Zach Smell, the European Union is doubling down on it, and they're amplifying it, and they're encouraging all these companies that do business in the European Union, including global corporations, to abide by these radical policies that cut into profits, which is the whole purpose of going into business in the first place, right? All right, so that's an update on ESG. We're going to get to John Selleck tomorrow. I want to hold that off until tomorrow so we can get a real good understanding of how important all these various counties are in this election. All right, we have time now for some comments and questions here on Tom Jordan Live. Let's bring them up one by one. Let's try to take three here, maybe a few more if we have time. From R. Paulus, as it stands, we have something of an honor system in the hands of dishonorable people. Even if they're not dishonorable, we are to trust something that is not trustworthy. Yeah, you're right. R. Paulus, that's well said. And I can't state this enough, that if you find something that is not trustworthy and you point it out, like this is objectively not trustworthy, and you bring it to the attention maybe of the Secretary of State, what they'll end up doing is, instead of looking into that, they'll identify you as someone who's not trustworthy because you're spouting disinformation. And nowadays, in this political climate, that is a threat, they say, to democracy. It's a threat to our republic in this country. It actually hurts individuals by pointing these things out. So just a reminder, our conversation earlier on this program was, thankfully, he's an attorney. He knows better, but he received a ballot from Washington, D.C., with someone else's name on it. It was blank, just ready to be filled out, and anybody could fill it out and signed it and turned it back in, and it would have counted as a vote. The problem was that person maybe either doesn't exist, that identity has been stolen, but he certainly does not live in that house. And he hasn't likely for a long time. And he said that it was either a 95-year-old woman who lives in Virginia, maybe it's her, or some 25-year-old kid, but they can't find either one of those individuals. So it may be someone that doesn't exist, or maybe sadly had passed away, and now they're using that identity to try to allow somebody to vote. And I do, hopefully tomorrow I'll get this video to point out the admitting Democratic radical activist in Georgia who admitted to, on camera, it was a secret conversation being secretly recorded over dinner, I believe, of him admitting to all the things they did in the state of Georgia to cheat. And he says that word, we cheated, we keep cheating. We're doing this all over the place. And he went down the list, and he mentioned going into nursing homes and taking ballots and stacking ballots and ballot harvesting and stuffing them into these precincts when they kicked all the Republicans out in Georgia. in 2020, and they were counting the ballots. They used a pipe leak as an excuse to get all the Republicans out of the building, and then we all went back in, the Democrats, and that's when we stuffed the ballots. We had, trucks and all these bins that we were just waiting for them all to leave so they wouldn't see us doing this. So those are not my words, and I just think for me, because I was like, this is hard to prove this kind of stuff. But anytime there's evidence that comes out, we should highlight that evidence. This is evidence. It's an eyewitness account of what happened in the state of Georgia. And now, by the way, just by me bringing this up, I now could be targeted for being a spreader of disinformation. And who knows, just like my guest earlier was getting knocks on his door from officials, basically telling him, you need to stop doing this because you're spreading this idea that maybe the elections are not as reliable as we say they are. And I think it's a fair question to ask. We're allowed to do that in a constitutional republic. Remember, the First Amendment allows that. Art Paulus, thank you so much for that comment. It was very noteworthy. Appreciate it very much. Let's go to the next one here. We bring it up, and it is from Ferris Happenings, the best name on the Tom Jordan Live comment section. Your thoughts on Bezos editorial. All right, so you don't know, Bezos, the owner of Amazon, he also owns the Washington Post. Washington Post made a decision not to make an endorsement this time around for either Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. Many of the staff, the reporters inside the Washington Post, were furious. Some even quit their jobs because they so disagreed with the Washington Post not endorsing Kamala Harris. Those are the far-left liberal reporters, the journalists who work at the Washington Post. But he came out and basically said, listen, we need to be a little bit more objective. We need to include more conservative voices in our publication. And, what that implies is that maybe they're going to hire more conservative-leaning journalists, just like they're staffed right now with primarily liberal journalists. Every now and again, they'll publish a column that is from a conservative, but of course that doesn't dominate it because they want to be recognized somehow, at least offering some type of opposing view to the status quo there at the Washington Post. But the reaction, if it doesn't tell you enough that they were people are wanting to quit, reporters, because they didn't endorse Kamala Harris because they so hate Donald Trump, and that's been their standard practice of writing stories for the past 8 years. 2016. But before that, they've been a liberal publication for so many years, and very condescending to anyone who would oppose their elitist position on these far left radical Marxist policies that they subscribe to. And how much they love Joe Biden and how he was always mentally competent. And even Kamala Harris now is saying, just the fact that she is unable to recognize that Joe Biden was not mentally capable of running this country and she doubles down on just the opposite was true. And I love the question by NBC of all places where they said, well, if Joe Biden was very capable of running in this race, why are you here, Kamala Harris? If he's as great as he says he was, why are you even here? And she said, well, you have to ask Joe Biden that question. He goes, well, the reason why you're here is because, everybody can see what happened in that debate. And well, he had a bad debate, but that was it. No, it's obvious. So I would the reason why I bring that up is because the Washington Post has been in that camp. And it wasn't until that debate when there was this coordinated effort from all of these journalists who came around and said, yeah, okay, now we are forced to admit that Joe Biden is not mentally fit right now. He's not mentally found. He's got something very, very wrong with him. And Kamala Harris needs to step in. Why Kamala Harris? She didn't get one vote in any of the primaries. She's never won any primary, ever. Even in 2019, she had to drop out, remember, because she couldn't win these primaries in 2020. Anyway, so Jeff Bezos, thankfully, maybe he's coming around. Maybe he's realizing, maybe he's realizing Donald Trump is likely to win this. And if he's going to garner favorable, policies for his business, maybe, who knows what his motivation is here. But the fact that he's acquiescing a little bit, I don't think much will happen because he's still very far left liberal. But at least he's doing something in that space. And it's very telling, the reaction of his newsroom at the Washington Post. Ferris Happenings, thanks so much for that. Got time for one more comment here on Tom Jordan Live. And it is from our Paulus again. Hey, welcome back. I think we just spoke. Any one of us can design a system that makes sense. We can run lotteries and credit cards fairly efficiently, but we can't run this somehow. Speaking of the election, I think they're running it, our Paulus, exactly as they want to run it. They want to make it very easy to cheat. They want to make it very easy to vote. So all sorts of, I think you used the word nefarious earlier. Maybe it was somebody else, but nefarious. They want to be nefarious in this election. I was a little skeptical of some of these claims, but now that more Democrats are coming out and admitting this is what they were doing, and then you see how easy it was. And by the way, that Democratic activist in Georgia, he pointed out that film 2000 Mules by Dinesh D'Souza was totally true. He said that is exactly how he did it. He said, I actually recognized one of the cars that he caught on camera dropping off these, the ballot harvesting. I know who that individual is. I know that car. So he was giving credence to 2000 Mules, even though the news media will not. This Democratic activist, when he's caught on camera, undercover, he admits it in private, or so he thought it was private. Let's do one more comment here, and then we're going to have to call it a day here on Tom Jordan Live. This one is from Jean-Luc Providence. Great name, Jean-Luc. Your intuition about Pennsylvania and Michigan, can Trump win one of them or both? He can win both. He can. I don't know if it's my intuition or just things that I've been looking into, but he certainly can. I think what he's doing well in Pennsylvania is he's touching big time on energy. Pennsylvania is a big energy state, and they rely on fossil fuels on that, and coal and those types of things. And if you get rid of that in the state of Pennsylvania, you're getting rid of potentially tens of thousands of jobs. And those jobs don't translate to electric vehicle types of jobs or renewable energy jobs. And I remember when it was the Keystone Pipeline, when Joe Biden came in and he got rid of the Keystone Pipeline and all the workers that suddenly in an instant lost their jobs. He told them, well, what are you complaining about? Just go out and get a renewable energy job. You'll be good with that. The problem is it doesn't translate. None of them are, or maybe very few. You have to go back to school. There's a long process of getting it. Those jobs went to other people. The ones that are the big coffers into your campaign. So they're going to try to make that case maybe with Pennsylvania that they can just get other jobs in the renewable energy sector. No, it's not that easy. And they know that is the case. When it comes to Michigan, I'm a little skeptical about the state of Michigan. This is a very strange state. I do now live in the state of Michigan. And when I came here, it was under Republican in the state legislature. The Republicans had the House, they had the Senate, and they had the governor's office, but it was still very a purple state. The Democrats have now taken over all three, the House, the Senate, and the governor's office, and they do it by a great amount of deceit, pretending that actually they lean more conservative than they actually do in those political years. We saw that in the midterms. And now we're seeing it again. They're pretending they're all against EV mandates, and they're the ones that are implementing these policies. And just a few months back, they were saying we have to go all in on renewable energies. Just as they're all in on unions. They're all in on union power, dictating how teachers are supposed to run their classrooms, which teachers can be let go, and which teachers. They don't have any more standards for teacher accountability. They got rid of these, and these third grade and fourth grade requirements that kids need to be taught they need to be able to learn to read at grade level. Now that's gone now. In very, very recent days, in the past few months, these Democrats putting these laws that make it more difficult for people to thrive. So the population loss in Michigan is just rapidly, it's decreasing. People are going to other states where they have better educational systems, better economies, lower taxes, fewer regulations, and less hostility from the political elites who are currently in power. Anyway, Jean-Luc, I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly, but it's a great question. I do think that Michigan can turn around. People just realize they're being lied to by a lot of these people in office. It's okay to question the election. It's okay to question your governor by her own unilateral authoritarian decisions that impact your life directly. You can question that even today, even 3 years after those lockdowns were lifted, primarily by order of the Supreme Court against her wishes. It's okay to bring that up again. Remind people what's going on in your state. Jean-Luc, thanks so much. And thank you for watching the program today, Tom Jordan Live. Tomorrow, we're going to have John Selleck on the program from Harbor Strategic Public Affairs. We're going to go through these various counties, battleground states, and dive deep into the election. And some other surprises as well coming up tomorrow on the Wednesday edition of Tom Jordan Live. Until then, God bless you. Have a great day.